good evening, everyone. Lovely to, I wish to see you all, but actually we had a lovely problem with this event, in as much as it was so oversubscribed, we had to move from the sort of traditional Zoom format into webinar format. So you can see us, I very much hope, but we can't see you. However, that we have got, or let me have a look, sort of just approaching 100 of you on the webinar this evening. So fantastic for you to make the time. My name's Pete Spriggs. I'm the chair of the Friends of the Buxton International Festival, and we're hosting this evening's discussion. I'm just going to go through a few nuts and bolts, as is the way with these things, and I'll introduce the subject and our sort of guests, as it were, this evening. So opera and COVID-19, navigating the pandemic and where next. For those of you who have got questions, we're sort of splitting this evening into two parts. First part, I'll be having a conversation with Michael and Emily, and we'll be looking back. We'll be looking back over the last year and what that has meant for opera and all the sort of things that are connected with that wonderful art form. And then the other half of the evening, we'll be looking forward. And we'll be looking forward to the Buxton Festival from the 8th of July this year. And we'll be talking a bit about how the festival's having to respond to COVID and some of the things that will be the same, but some of the things that will be having to be a bit different. Some of you have put forward some questions in advance, which is great, and we've formed our commentary in response to those, but we're also really keen to get other questions you might have. This is a great opportunity to sort of have that conversation. So if you want to post a question, you should be able to find a Q&A little button on the bottom of your Zoom menu bar. You can click on that and then post the questions. But if you can keep your questions to the sort of looking back for the start of the evening, then we'll have a Q&A session after that before we move into the looking forward section. So it gives me a real pleasure to welcome Emily Gottlieb, who's currently Chief Executive of National Opera Studio. That, for those of you who don't know, provides professional training of the highest quality to young opera singers and repeteurs. Previously, Emily spent 10 years working at the Royal Opera House, during which she received the first ever Performing Arts Consortium supported fellowship from the CLAW Leadership Programme. In a voluntary capacity, Emily is a founder director of Opera UK, and there'll be a bit more about that in, later on this evening. And since June, we've been very fortunate to have her involved with the Buxton Festival as a trustee of the festival. Emily, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. The other person who I'll be in conversation with is Michael Williams, and many of you will know he's the CEO, has been for a couple of years of the festival, and after a torturous journey, he's back in the UK. So we're all breathing out a sigh of relief that you're here and you're safe and you're well, Michael. So thank you once again for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Pete.
So Emily, your sort of starter question is rewinding us back a year. And we had that initial lockdown, with the world stopped. We all sort of worked out what a screen was and a webcam was and what online ordering was. And then sort of we got a little bit caught up, or at least I did, in the world that you were then having to inhabit. But what happened in those few months after lockdown for those who are connected to opera?
A lot. I think it's safe to say a lot of planning, replanning, and then I think most of us are probably on about Plan Z by now. So I think the kind of initial what happened was of course we had to go into lockdown. I think most of us are sort of used to dealing with, most of us who work in the opera world, I'm sure Michael would agree with this, you know, most of us are used to dealing with sort of crises as they occur, and we're quite adept at managing these crises. So in some ways we were quite well prepared for something, and actually the drama of it was kind of quite exciting in the beginning. And then it got very quickly unexciting, I think, for everybody, it's safe to say. I think it depends on your standpoint and who we're talking about, because of course for people who are working in opera companies, it was an awful lot of having to save money quite quickly. Really, it was a lot of staff going on furlough, a lot of decision making around the kind of operational side of companies. From our perspective, closing the building meant that we immediately switched our training online. We didn't actually stop at any point, in fact, but we had to quickly work out how to train singers and pianists in an online capacity, and actually we learned a lot through that. And I think the thing that has also been difficult for people during this pandemic has been that the difference between people working in companies and our freelance workforce, of course, which make up a huge amount of people working in this industry, that was really tricky for people, because that's a situation where their work was lost. A lot of people stopped in the middle of kind of dress rehearsals and leading up to opening nights. And I think that the sense of community that we all felt or all feel and usually have with doing live performance, the loss of that was quite acute. And I think everybody kind of went into a little bit of a wormhole with it. I think it's very different now, but I know you were going to come on to that. So I think the difference between kind of scrabbling to keep one's company going and working out how to navigate the government furlough scheme and everything that we were fortunate to be given, and our freelance workforce, we wanted to kind of put our arms around our people and say it's going to be all right. So I feel like that we've been doing a lot of that in our world for a year or so. It's been a year.
So navigating both the professional and the personal sort of dimension of giving people the sort of ability to get through it. You talked about online training. How did that navigate? How do you bring young upcoming singers into the world, giving them the skills via this sort of medium?
Well, actually, it worked quite well, strangely. I mean, you would have what's been quite complicated is the musical coaching, because, of course, when we were locked down, some people had home situations where they may have been in their spare room, or they had children, or they would be with a flatmate, or no piano. And so you had to kind of work out how to coach people in these very different circumstances. And there is we did it on Zoom, but there is a sort of lag on Zoom, which means that actually musical coaching is harder, but you just have to kind of navigate around it. And we did find ways, things like stagecraft, movement, languages, these all work really very well on digital platforms. And we've been doing it up till relatively recently now, even though the National Opera Studio building is now open again for training. But we've learned a lot. We've done a lot of blended learning, and of course the one advantage, certainly for our organisation, that the closure of the opera companies has been that we've had an awful lot of people offer to come and talk to our young artists. So we've had wonderful artists, for conductors, singers, directors, come and kind of share their knowledge, and actually in an environment where people are so sort of separate, so disparate, that's been a really, really wonderful kind of a community thing to do, and something that we may not have been able to do before. I think there's something also perhaps about Zoom that gives a kind of honesty about people's communications. That's, we're all, I mean, as you can see my background, I've moved house relatively recently, so I haven't got much furniture, so you'll have to forgive me. But I think there's a kind of, there's everyone in their own environment is a little bit more honest and able to be open. And actually for a training organisation, that can be very helpful. They've gone through a lot, obviously, and, work prospects are complicated, isn't it? Because one has to be realistic about the world of work at the moment, and there's tough times ahead, no question about it. But at the same time, the young people that are going through training at the moment are perhaps more resilient than others in some sense. And the fact that we've been able to move quite quickly into digital, look at online, we've got some live streaming equipment being put into the studio as we speak. So there's a lot more that we're realizing we can do that we never really considered doing before. So there are sort of silver linings to all this, I think.
And also access to that sort of community of tutors and people within the professions who potentially you would never have dreamed of having brought into people's homes to help them with that study.
Absolutely, yes.
Michael, so from the festival perspective, can you is it so painful that you've just blotted it out of your mind? What happened in those first few months after the initial lockdown last year?
I think good evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here, and thank you so much for all of your interest in attending this event. For me and our team, I think it was so invigorating to reassess, relook at how we can put on a festival. And with the board's help, we, as Emily said earlier, we had scenarios A, B, C, and the dreaded D scenario, which was cancelling. And we worked out budgets for every single scenario. We looked very carefully at the changing climate as things were developing and evolving. And the whole team kept up with, okay, time for a new scenario, everybody, let's go. This is scenario E. Adrian, are you on board? Right, now marketing, are you on board? Right, we're going to present this. Let's see how this goes. And eventually, we were able to work out this year's festival. So it was invigorating, at times kind of stressful, but at other times very creative.
And what's the mood in the opera world at present? An honest sort of assessment of where we're at.
You know, I think, and Emily will bear me out on this, there's a great deal of excitement about the prospect that places will be open, theatres will be open in May, June and July. And we're looking very carefully at what the social distancing restrictions will be come the 21st of June. But there is certainly an upbeat mood in amongst the colleagues as we are putting our heads down and preparing for the upcoming opera season in summer.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the one word that keeps coming to mind is determination.
That's it.
You know, there's a kind of grit that we are around the corner from. Spring has come, you know, daffodils are out, and we're going to put on a show. I mean, it feels like everybody is kind of on that train, and you know, it's been a very, very up and down year. I think it would be really sort of disingenuous to say that everyone is just on this kind of journey and thinking that everything's going to be okay. I think that's not right. However, I think that we've been going through so many different scenarios in our heads. We're so determined to give our audiences and our, you know, friends and our donors what we want to give them. You know, we're all in this profession because we desperately want to put on live performance. And we will do it, you know, and no matter what happens. And I think that determination and kind of creativity, Michael, don't you think? You know, we're all creative people. We'll work. There will be problems that will come up against us. You know, we may find that the government restrictions change. We may find that we have to enact, you know, plan A and a half. But I think that's all right because we will do it. So determination is the key for me.
So thinking about those young up-and-coming singers who are just entering into the profession, because I've been, you know, acutely aware of certain age groups that have really sort of taken a hit on what we've had to navigate, and those just coming into university or to training with the opera studio. I mean, how did their transition get managed, and how did they sort of get supported into that, you know, first early steps?
Yeah, this is really tough. I mean, when we last our training year runs from September to June, and of course last year's young artist at the National Opera Studio, we locked down, of course, in March, and then we actually didn't see them again because even though we were online, we didn't see them again until they finished in June, and we managed a lovely live-streamed online, not a live-streamed, an online concert, and there were lots of wonderful things that we did. But we then invited them back to come back the next year to have some support if they didn't have anything to go on to. And indeed, we're doing the same thing with this current year of young artists to offer them opportunities that we might not have been able to give them this year, next year. So there's a sense that support definitely won't go away for young people. I mean, you know, truthfully, we don't know what is happening in the sort of wider world. There are lots of opportunities, I think, that maybe haven't happened before. The opera kind of sector, I think, is really opening out into becoming a place that isn't, you know, we've for a long time been a sector that has had sort of proscenium arch theatres, and our audience sits in a, you know, an often wonderful, like in Buxton, a wonderful theatre, and watches opera. And of course this year, I mean, my uncle has watched, I think, 92 operas this year online, you know, and counting, you know, the Met and Glyndebourne and everybody's put opera online. And of course, we all know that the live art form of opera is the thing that we want to go to. But I think the creativity, especially of the small companies and individuals, has meant that I think that a career for an opera singer now could really be wildly different, perhaps, from what it was sort of 5 or 10 years ago. And I think that can be a really positive thing for opera especially. And we can get into areas that we really haven't been in before. And that, again, I think that's a positive change.
Indeed. We sometimes forget the sort of ecosystem of roles that sit behind putting on an opera. You know, stage designers, the builders, lighting directors, you know, and all the other sort of technical crew and people involved in the promotion and what have you. How have they sort of found their way through, and what sort of support's been around for those elements of the profession?
Honestly, I think it's been tough for them. I won't lie. I think that our freelance creative professionals have probably had some of the toughest time in the last year. There's a new organisation that's been set up, in fact, for these very people, called Freelancers Make Theatre Work, and it's an organisation that's really kind of putting its arms around that freelance network of people. And of course, there's been sort of pieces of work, and there's been a lot of different things to offer. And they've again, being a creative profession, we've seen a lot of really interesting work coming out in areas that perhaps you don't expect. But some people have stepped sideways, or some people have stepped sideways for the moment. But I think it's a group of people who really and truly, we will probably need to think about how to support in the future, and how our industry and the profession moves forward, because we really do our industry relies so heavily on this group of not just singers and conductors and directors, but wonderful creative, wig makers and hat makers and shoemakers. I mean, just a plethora of skills, and
the list goes on, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. What surprised you the most about the last 12 months? Michael, you start off with that one.
I think resilience. We and also a sense of understanding that the thing is really serious, and you have to really accept that this is a very once in a lifetime occurrence, and you have to kind of acknowledge the seriousness of it, and then you have to have faith that it'll change. And that's essentially what I've been surprised at, by coming to that realization.
Same question to you, Emily.
But perhaps community, I would say. I remember, and this is nothing to do with opera really, but the sort of coming out onto the streets in the early days of when we were kind of clapping for the NHS. And I think that actually sometimes we can get very into our own bubble of how important the opera world is, and how important that these things are to us because we're in this industry. And I suppose, it's really very good to get out of that sometimes and think, how can we help to affect wider change, and what can we do to kind of, it's not all about opera sometimes. I mean, this is actually all about opera, so I won't go too far on that. But you know what I mean? It's a sense of community, and how much we need each other and to support each other. Perhaps that's not really answering your question so much, but
I suppose I'm interested in how opera has, or examples of how opera has supported wider society and provided that sort of escapism or joy that so many people have lacked for so long. And I don't know if there are examples that you're able to share.
I think an example might be, I mean, ENO's got some fantastic work coming out of there at the moment, such as, when they did their drive-through Bohème in Alexandra Palace. I mean, that was innovative and unusual, and it was a kind of way of thinking about the challenges in a completely different way. And actually, same company, but they're doing at the moment something called ENO Breathe, which is to help patients of long COVID with helping them with breath, and it's a fantastic project. So I think that, and I mean, I was fortunate enough to go to Garsington last summer to see Fidelia. It was a socially distanced Fidelia with a very, very, very small band, which was phenomenal, because again, how many times do you see Fidelia with sort of a 12-piece orchestra? It's they sounded like 50 players, because the kind of determination and the sort of the determination of those players were just really shone through. So I think there's lots of examples of how, I mean, digital is an obvious area where a lot of companies have gone, and a lot of companies have really wanted to kind of showcase what they can do. But I sometimes think also the more human side. We've seen a lot of stories of people wanting to take time to celebrate the people who work within their organisations, and I think that's a really wonderful thing.
And those sort of examples of innovation, which do you think will see us through? We'll continue to use that approach, that sort of technique, and we'll sort of be surprised that it didn't happen before COVID came along.
I think one of the things that is likely to happen is that we'll all have to rethink slightly our approach to environmental sustainability of big sets, big costumes. I think that I don't think they'll go away for sure, but I think in a lot of cases we might look at what else is out there to replace the sort of or to add value, perhaps. There are a lot of fantastic examples of how digital and live can come together, and I think that people shouldn't be frightened of that. It's always this wonderful examples of sort of live performance enhanced by this incredible digital technology, which is kind of taking off, that give the audience a really amazing experience. And I think we're going to have to think about how sustainable we are as companies, how much we can share with each other as well, because there's a lot more, don't you think, Michael, that we can do to kind of collaborate more, share more, and I think that's the way we should go.
What are your thoughts on that, Michael?
Very much so. I mean, I found during this crisis that the sharing that's been done amongst the other opera companies has been profound, and the doors have opened, and we've been asking each other quite personal questions about how organizationally we are coping, and it's been a great amount of sharing. I also think some of the innovations around programming, and our audiences are adventurous as well in opera, and I think that's been a great lesson for me, that we can actually look at more adventurous program down the line. That's something that we can bring in, and also the comfort of the audience in terms of ensuring that venues are properly ventilated, that there's proper time given to the experience. These are all lessons that we're going to take away from COVID in the future.
Tell me a bit more about the launch of Opera UK, Emily. Explain what that is and what led to its formation.
Yes, I mean, this has been sort of Opera UK is formed as a sort of sector support organisation for opera companies and individuals working within opera, and theatre has its own support organisation, as does dance, but opera hasn't up until now. And actually it's been in the sort of planning or the thought processes of many companies for really a long time, and I suppose it was propelled by this pandemic and what Michael just said about the need to collaborate and share more and be more honest with each other about our plans has propelled this into a real need. And we have, I think, 44 opera companies as members in this. It's only in the UK, and over 350 individual members, and that's from singers, directors, wig makers, lighting designers, all over. And the intention, we're a very young company, so we intend to start to lay out plans for how we can best support the opera sector going forward, be that with signposting, collaborative opportunities, seminars, linking people together, or sharing best practice. And I think there's a lot we can do, and we've just held a series of roundtables to find out how that can best happen, because what we've discovered is actually by supporting each other and helping to advocate for the story of opera in this country, also to our politicians, to our friends, to our audiences, we can collect really good data, but also we can collect really good stories, because maybe people don't know about the incredible work that's going on in a tiny distillery in Fife, because
I don't.
Exactly.
Well, I'm interested.
But there is really fun, there's some amazing innovative work going on in all corners of the country, and we want to kind of be able to celebrate and support that.
Very much indeed. So we're getting up to sort of the halfway mark. So this is where we see whether there are any questions which you'd like to pose to Emily and Michael in relation to the looking back. So we're going to cover the looking forward bit in a minute, but if there are any there, you've got two options. You can either post a question in the Q&A box, which will be on, an option will be on the black menu bar that's probably at the bottom of your screen, or if you're feeling brave, you can raise your hand and I can bring you in. You can do it verbally. So we'll just give it a moment to see if anyone has got any questions, maybe triggered by some of the content that we've just covered there. This is when we do need a musical interlude, Michael.
I can offer to sing, but I don't want to.
So any questions from our audience? Imagine you're in the Pavilion Arts Centre. None of you are shy at grabbing the microphone and asking the literary genius at the front of the stage, searching questions, check them on their toes. Well, I guess what you're probably waiting for is Adrian. Adrian, are you able to suddenly appear as if by magic? Switch on your video. We saw you. We saw a sort of a more blink, just a tiny bit of you.
I'm here.
You're there. You are indeed. Fantastic.
I'm here. Yeah, hello. With my phone with a worryingly low battery, but I'm here.
Okay.
And very happy to be. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see some familiar faces as well, and to hear about all the things that have been happening over the last year, which have largely been. I mean, there have been some difficult moments, but there have been also some very encouraging moments of collegial behaviour. And I'm excited to talk now a little about the operas and perhaps the concerts that are coming in 2021 to the festival. I think that's what I'm here for.
That is what you're here for. But I didn't formally introduce you, so apologies. Adrian Kelly, Artistic Director of the Buxton International Festival. So with the formalities done, we have got a question actually in the Q&A that's come. How do you think the pandemic will change how we approach programming in the future? So maybe you could talk us through the absolute joy we've got coming up for this July, and then maybe reflect on how the programming side of things was influenced or may well be in future.
Well, in many very different ways. I think the advent of digital is something we all just have to accept, whether we like it or not. And it's something that everyone's going to develop. And to be fair, the Met has benefited greatly from its back catalogue of operas, which were all recorded over the last years. And that's been a lifesaver for many people. But in terms of actual active programming, there are many different approaches. There's the have a lot of money and test everybody, which they've been doing in places like the Vienna State Opera. Then more realistically, there's much reduced forces with distance and choosing pieces where actually distance in big spaces makes, where possible, makes a whole range of operas smaller, on the smaller scale possible. And then something in between. Right now, I'm in the Opera House in Zurich, where I work through the year, and downstairs there's a piano rehearsal for the Tales of Hoffmann, which will be, performed once. They're rehearsing it for 6 weeks. They're performing it once and streaming it. I assume it will be something you have to buy. To watch, because the economics, the thoughts of it to me is unthinkable, really. I mean, if you think what Buxton would never have this possibility, but what they'll do is they'll stream it. The orchestra will be in a different building, piped in, sitting a huge disused church, sitting distance from one another, but in their full capacity. And then the singers are on stage, and they all are part of a strict testing regime. So the thing about this is it's not sustainable. In other words, it costs a lot of money. One can question whether we will have to look for the different possibilities. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to have to look at smaller works for the foreseeable future, hope that the vaccination program does what we're all hoping it will, and look at emerging from this towards the end of this year. But to be fair, we keep putting our expectations back a couple of months, don't we, in every area of society. So it just remains to be seen how we deal with it.
So looking forward to the 8th of July, 8th to 25th. If those dates aren't in your diaries now, folk, please do put them in. Plug over. Tell us some of the delights we're going to be able to witness.
Good. So I'll start sort of by continuing on the same subject about how one programs. The first challenge that we had, Michael and I, when we were thinking about how to deal with this is what's the best way for Buxton to react? Some people are going outside. We all felt that the Derbyshire weather is not reliable enough for us to do that. We know that, I think. Also, there is such an attraction for people to come to the Opera House, and if it were at all possible to make that viable, we wanted to do that. So socially distanced performance was where we went. But then there's also the financially, of course, if you have a vastly reduced audience, which we do, or at least rather which we're planning for, you also have to consider the safety of the performers. And it was already in my mind back in September that if or whenever we were planning the new programs, the scenarios that Michael referred to, that with everything went well with vaccination, which in fact it has, that the audience many members of the audience would be protected, but actually a lot of the performers would not. And so we also have to make the situation for performers a safe one. And so I decided that we would look to find works which suit the Buxton mission of presenting lesser known works by established composers, but also things which are in the sort of the dimensions which both manageable in Buxton, but also can be accommodated if necessary with social distancing. So it was really a bit of a challenge, quite an enjoyable challenge, occasionally frustrating in the extreme, but trying to find things which had a theme which it felt to us were appropriate. And so what we have is, I'll start with one piece which remains from the previous festival, which is Asus and Galatea. Christian Kernin is a friend of mine and a wonderful conductor, and he runs the extremely fine early opera company, and he's bringing a troupe of singers to do Asus and Galatea, a piece written for a small space, a beautiful, not too long, which means it's also very apt in COVID times. We're trying to look at pieces where possible they're not too long, so that we don't have to have breaks and the complication of going in and out. That is a big highlight for me, and I'm very glad we were able to maintain that. Another production we're able to keep with a very slightly reduced orchestra is A Little Night Music, which is our first musical and a collaboration with Paul Kerrison, Wyn Davis is conducting, and the Buxton Opera House. So those two items have remained. And I'm actually particularly proud of the other two pieces, main operas we've taken on to fill the gap left by the Rossini and the Donizetti. And they are Eriland Wallen's opera Dido's Ghost. Now, it's a new piece, which might be a little worrying for some who are not necessarily sold on contemporary music, but she's a fantastic writer for the stage. And what she's done is she's written a piece that sort of entwines itself around Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, which, as we all know, is one of the great masterpieces of the English opera tradition. And what I think is particularly exciting about this is that the Dunedin Consort will play. It charts the story of before and after the events of Dido and Aeneas, and it's an excellent cast. And the Dunedin Consort will play on original instruments, and that, I think that to hear the piece, also to hear modern sounds or different, it's what I'll call original sounds on old instruments, will be a particularly thrilling experience. And actually, ours will be the first live to an audience performance, so that's something we're very proud of. Then another nice coincidence in a way is that this year is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Malcolm Arnold, an underrated English composer, British too, of course, but he wrote The Dancing Master in the 50s. It's a sort of Ealing comedy in style, in a way. It was considered rather risque at the time, but it's a piece that John Andrews, the conductor who I've known for a while, was passionate about and wrote to me about some time ago, and I was planning it for a later season. And he made a very successful recording recently, and he has also got the permission of the Arnold Estate to produce a version which, again, can be adapted to work well in Buxton. So with a smaller orchestra, we've tried, as I say, to avoid the compromises that other companies are forced to consider. For instance, if you look at some of the big companies, they are preparing smaller orchestrations of well-known operas. And Emily mentioned the Garsington Fidelia, which was a very successful and brave thing for them to do. And I think, while I think that's an excellent solution, I'm also excited to be able to provide some pieces which are original in their smaller form, some pieces which also are very well suited to Buxton's stage and its proportions. So those are the 4 main operas on the stage. There's also one concert performance, but a rather special performance, and actually it will be staged. I call it a concert. We've always been thinking of it as part of our concert series, but Sir John Tomlinson will sing King Lear in The Shackled King by John Caskin, and that for me is a very exciting moment. He's someone who I've admired since I first heard him in Covent Garden as an 18-year-old, and I was sitting in the back row of the amphitheatre and I could hear every word as if he was next to me. I couldn't believe it. I was lucky enough to work with him on a production while I was a young artist in London some years later, and he's a force of nature. And so this piece with him, an actor, a supreme actor, a singing actor, presenting Lear in his he's I don't know how old Sir John is, but he's definitely in his 70s. And it's exciting, really, for me to see him present such an iconic figure. And again, that will be the first. It's been streamed, but that will be the first performance live to an audience. So that's something, again, I'm proud of, to have 2 big English premieres, in a sense, coming to Buxton. There's another production which will be with we don't have a chorus. That's something we've had to, there are always compromises. There are always things which get lost, and one of those things is, unfortunately, the chorus. There, for reasons we'll all understand about how busy the stage is and how difficult it is already to manage the safety concerns. So what we are doing is keeping our connection with the Royal Northern College of Music, and we'll do Pauline Viardot's Cendrillon, which is a charming piece that will be in the Pavilion Arts Centre, and also part of our Platform 3 initiative, which I think Michael might want to say something about, which is it's essentially our new cooperation with the Opera House to work on community and youth and young people's theatre, and that's The Enchanted Pig by Jonathan Dove. So again, lots and lots of English opera, a little bit of French sophistication thrown in, and so that's our, I think, very varied opera program. There's a lot of English there. I find that wasn't a sort of a patriotic act. It's just that there is something, people will be staying in England this summer, one has the feeling, and there is a great tradition of English opera which is slightly neglected, and so I'm glad that we're able to present that in Buxton. It feels fitting to me somehow. Then our concert series is I think as good as it's ever been. One aspect which I should mention specifically is that our afternoon concerts will be performed twice in many cases, and that is has become a common practice during the COVID period, just to allow us to have smaller audiences, but to make it financially viable and allow people to sit in safe conditions. The performers are open to it. The concerts last an hour rather than an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes. But some highlights, I mentioned Sir John Tomlinson, Natalie Klein, Freddie Kempf, Catherine Stott and Martin Roscoe are the pianists. Artist in residence, Jennifer Pike, who played so beautifully in 2019 with the BBC Phil, who are also returning. Concerts by the English Concert, by the Northern Chamber Orchestra, by Ex Cathedra. So some old favourites, but some wonderful young stars as well. Fleur Barron is a young mezzo who's really one to be watched, an extraordinary singer, and someone I would recommend you take a punt on, because I know we see the names, other recitalists, Mark Padmore, Roderick Williams and Dame Sarah Connolly. I should say Roderick Williams OBE and Natalie Klein OBE, if I'm about it. Very distinguished, all of them. These are people whose names we recognize, and people, we see it with the ticket sales, people flock to see them. But there are some wonderful, lesser known young artists out there, and I do hope that people will give them a chance. So that's my summary. A little bit rambling, rather longer than I'd planned on.
Well, I think you're an hour ahead of us, so you're later into your evening. But I'm glad your battery held up. So many thanks.
Just
Adrian.
about. I mean, yeah.
So we won't take it personally if you suddenly have to drop off off the
I
line.
might drop off shortly and then reappear. That's what I'm expecting.
Well, that builds an element of excitement and frissons, adrenaline that runs through us. So that's good to have on a Thursday evening. Michael, we've sort of touched on certain elements of the sort of COVID response that the festival's got to deliver this year. Do you want to just walk us through what's going to happen, what people can expect, what will be different, and then we've as I said at the beginning, we've had a whole suite of questions in advance, which has been great. Thank you to those of you who submitted those. Michael's going to try and respond to a lot of those, and we've got a couple more in the chat, which we'll pick up if they don't get covered in your explanation. Over to you then, Michael.
Thank you very much, Pete. Yes, I do want to thank everybody for the filling out the survey, which was hugely instrumental in our thinking and in our guidance for this coming festival. 73% of you stated that you were planning to come to the festival if safety measures were in place. 22% preferred to wait until next year, and there was a remaining 5 to 6% who answered other. Didn't feel that they could answer the situation, which obviously was evolving so rapidly. And when the board made the decision on the 18th of February, it was very clearly linked to the fact that it's so important that this international festival is an affirmation of our cultural leadership in the area. It also was important for us to do the festival because of our future sustainability. It also honors the loyalty and support of friends that has been hugely supportive of our organization and our intent. And it satisfies the grant requirements that we have as a MPO from the Arts Council of England. And of course, we are beneficiaries of the Cultural Recovery Fund, and putting on a festival of this magnitude requires that sort of funding. And it demonstrates very clearly our commitment to employing freelancers, musicians, technicians, and also producing rare and unusual operas on a very high standard, as Adrian referred to. So I thought what I'd do is I just sort of go through all the questions in a sort of a way of actually anticipating what you can expect. First of all, we have the brochures in print as I speak. We finished the brochure on Friday. It's gone to the publishers, and you will be receiving the brochure shortly. You will also be receiving your usual booking form. You will be able to fill out that booking form and send it to the office, and Lee and our team will make sure that that is given to the box office. Now, in terms of the seating capacity in each of the venues, we've had to reduce the seating in the Opera House to roughly 400. The same applies to St. John's. It's going to be roughly 170. The seating in the PAC will be 180. The seating at the Assembly Room will be around about 80. So this means that there will be a reduction in seating availability. We will be doing the seating in bubbles of 2, 3, and 4, and there will be some single seats. You'll be encouraged to help us by booking in pairs or in 3s and 4s, as single seats are a problem in the sense that it means that there is less seats available if we have too many single seats, but there are single seats available. This will be a good time to become a friend of the festival if you are not one, because you will have priority booking ahead of the public booking, which opens in May. So in terms of the social distancing, we've taken the guidelines from RB Solutions, which is the firm that is informing other theatres around the country and is working with the Opera House. And they have gone into the theatre and measured the seating to make sure that everybody is socially distanced space between couples and groups of 3s and 4s. So do expect the fact that you may not be getting the favorite seat that you've always wanted in the past. And this year it will be slightly different. So once you've got your tickets and you've made your booking, when you arrive in at the festival, you will see some changes that will take place. And David, thank you for asking the question about masks, but we will be expecting our audience to be wearing masks during performances. I think it's now common that this is the case, and I think it's a safety measure as well. And that's also another reason why we've made the operas slightly shorter than normal. The only opera that has an interval is in fact the musical, Little Night Music. And all of the others will be run through without an interval to prevent the notion of getting up and moving. So we've looked very carefully at those parameters around the shows that we're doing. Some of the things that you will notice when you arrive: there will be hand sanitizer stations. There will be enhanced cleaning after each performance. There will be some fever screening at the actual opera house. It's a machine. As you walk past it, it'll be able to tell us what the temperatures of individuals are. There won't be any individual checking, but it'll just be a screen that has been put up in the opera house. And there will be signage, one-way signage. So, for example, we'll be having additional toilets at the opera house. It's really important that we all know how small those toilets are and getting to them. So there will be additional toilets brought in for that period. Each of the venues that we are working with, the St. John's, the PAC, the Octagon, and the Assembly Room, will all have risk assessments attached to them. And all of these processes will be put in place before you arrive. So you can feel secure in coming to the opera. Paul and Carol asked a question about whether all the operas will be streamed. We are, for the first time, offering a digital season. We will be making a recording of Asus and Galatea, 5 music events, and 8 book talks, and you'll be able to purchase this pass to all of those events, and we will put that onto YouTube and online on the 26th of July after the festival. So there will be an opportunity to see one of the operas and some of the music and some of the books, which I think will be very good. So, Antony, thank you so much for asking about the booking system. I hope that answers your question around reduced numbers. Eleanor asked the question, will we be expecting everyone to have the vaccine, and will we be putting in a system where you need to show your vaccine certificate? We will not be doing that. That won't be the case. We are quite comfortable that there will be a lot of people will have taken the vaccine, but we're not going to put the onus on showing any sort of form that you've had the vaccine. That's not something that we will not be doing. There will be a waiting list if you don't get your seats that you prefer. And we will hope that come the 21st of June, we'll be able to open up and there will be more seats available. So I think, Pete, in terms of going through all the questions, those are all the answers that I can give. The one question was, will there be changes to the ventilation in the opera house? Very good question, and I don't have the answer to that, I'm afraid. I don't think, as the opera house has been closed for the most part of this year, that much has been done about the ventilation. But it's a very good question, particularly in this time. So I don't have an answer to that one, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm just going through some of the things that popped up in the Q&A, some of which have been answered live. Just so I don't forget, we've got a request. Tell us more about Opera UK. Emily, is there a URL? Is there a website for Opera UK? There is, yes. Is it something I can put in the chat that you could put up? Or I think the chat might be locked down, but
okay. It's very simple. It's just www.operauk.net.
Okay, so operauk.net. Yep. Hopefully that gives you a bit more detail there, Mr. John. That's great. There's a question here from which says, "Are we to understand that single people are unwelcome? Should we not even try to book?"
Oh, no, that's a very good question. I have to tell you, who answered that question?
That was Sue Ward who asked.
Sue, thank you so much for asking that question. That's a really good one. You know, this one has caused me many sleepless nights and the team. Because the simple fact of the arithmetics of it is that we only have a small amount of single seats available. So where possible, it might be a good idea for you to get into a bubble with somebody and come as two. But if you book early, there will be single seats available for you, but it would help us enormously if you could find somebody to come with and book a ticket with.
So single people definitely welcome, but it might just be a question of the challenge of getting the seats allocated with the demand that would be there. But no, Sue, we hope you'll come and come and join us this July. John Langdale has said he's interested to know how secure do we feel the Opera House's situation is for the future, both in a financial and an artistic sense? So many of you will be aware that the Opera House will open after over a year of closure. It will open with the festival. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of artistic sort of future and financial one for that, although clearly we don't run the Opera House?
No, but I mean, Paul and I obviously have very close communications over the last month. What I can say is that for the first time in the Opera House's history, they have received a grant from the Cultural Recovery Fund, which is public knowledge, and that has been hugely helpful in getting them through this period and helping them to plan for the future. We are very confident that they will certainly be able to service our needs during the run-up to the festival, and I believe that from August there are bookings, and September there are bookings that Paul is contemplating. So I think that it's not going to be easy, but I think that there's enough support for the Opera House to get through this year.
And we've got a question here about whether online bookings are available.
The online bookings will be available for priority booking, I think on the 6th of April. Is that right, Pete?
Yes, yeah. So the various sort of tiers of friends, the priority booking dates come from the sort of higher tier of friends to the sort of standard friends across April. The message, which I would be remiss as my position as chair if I didn't say, is this year it's the best year to become a friend if you aren't already. And we'd also really encourage you to sort of think about passing the message on to others who want to come to the festival to become new friends. We've had an upsurge in numbers, which has been great to see after the announcement of the festival, which is really encouraging. But this year is the year to be a friend, and hopefully that will then see us well into 2022 when they've had the first taste of Buxton, as many of these new people who've joined will have indeed. So thank you for that. Covered that one, Robin John. So online booking, yes, will be available, and you'll be getting a code on your printed brochure and booking form, which will allow you to access that online booking in the normal sense. We've got a question here from Kath Allwood. Are some of the gaps in the seating likely to be filled in the rule changes expected for the 21st of June if they go ahead?
So what we're hoping for is that if the rules are changed before the 21st of June, or indeed on the 21st of June, the seats that were closed off will be made open, and we will be able to open up all of those seats, and we hope to be able to then sell more tickets to the operas. So that is the intent, that if the government allows us to open up, we will do so. And obviously they can only give that ruling if they believe that it is safe. Nevertheless, all the COVID protocols will still stay in place. Masking will still be used, even though there may be more seats, and all of the protocols will still be in place, Pete.
So once again, we need that crystal ball, don't we? And as much as the government guidelines are the ones we're working to at the moment, and if we'll secure certainty that there'll be a particular rule change on the 21st of June, we can respond to that, but it will just be about making that call when and if the situation changes. Got a question here from Susan Mensforth about the Buxton Foundation and how it's been involved in supporting the festival this year.
It's been a huge boost to the festival in 2019 and continues to be. We are really committed to building the foundation. It's a body of very determined trustees who want to raise funds, all for the purposes of putting on the festival. It is the harbour for legacies. So we do have a legacy program, and all the legacies will be given to the foundation in order for them to invest them for the future. And it's a really important part of our work that we keep the foundation growing over the next couple of years. So it's an important organization and a feeder really for the festival.
Yeah.
And we've got a question here from Francis Carter about books. So we had a musical theme to this evening, Francis, but there is, yes, a rich selection of books. Do you want to give us a few of the ones to look forward to, Michael?
Yes, very much so. I mean, we're thrilled to have Andrew Marr come with his new book. We have a range of academics and specialists in the field of theology. We have Richard Hawkins, who's going to be coming. Del Grumpel will be talking about his epic tome of the Raj in India, and James Rady will be coming along too. So we have quite a feast of books that Vicky has put up for us.
So that, I think, gets to the end of the questions, unless there's anyone. Oh, there's one that's popped in. The response to our questions, as Catherine, makes her wary of booking last minute, except perhaps at the last minute. So yeah, I mean, this is a difficult call. We, as I say, we hope that we can release more seats. There is no certainty of that. The capacity will be lower, so your priority booking as friends, it will become more important this year than ever before. We're going to just manage that as best we can with the capacity available, but please do have your booking choices ready and book at the earliest opportunity to secure the seats that you want with that. Joe says, how will Rhythm of the Dance impact on the festival, both running and on the same day? I'm not entirely sure what that means.
Rhythm of the Dance, I do not believe is in place anymore. That, I'm afraid, had to be postponed. I think that the Irish company pulled out at the last moment, so they will not be coming to the Opera House, and instead it'll be an evening of a little night music.
Okay, so that was something that was previously advertised in the Opera House that now has moved as one of the changes as a result of COVID.
Correct.
Good, thank you. I'm going to draw this to a close as we near the hour, but before we do, I'm just going to see whether Felicity Goodey, who's the chair of the Buxton International Festival, is able just to say a few closing remarks. But I'd like to say a huge thanks to Emily and also to Michael for helping us navigate this evening. And thanks to you as friends. It has been really humbling to have you join us and stay with us this year. So huge thanks to all of you, and look forward to seeing you in July. Over to you, Felicity.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. And can I say an enormous thank you to you, Pete, for everything that you do, and all of the friends, because frankly, we wouldn't be having this discussion tonight. We wouldn't be looking forward to the 41st Buxton International Festival in July were it not for the undying support of all our wonderful friends, and you've been more supportive than over the past 12 months. You've just been amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you too to all of our amazing staff. Michael and Adrian have just played a blinder. They really have. I don't know about them, but I've lost count of all the scenarios they've gone through. But I am confident, I'm not only me, but the entire board, of whom Emily is a member, so she can back me up here, that we have, yes, the festival will feel perhaps a little bit different at first because of the social distancing, because of all the security and safety measures that we've put in place. But I guarantee you will forget all about that really in a very short order, because this is a glorious, glorious program. The board is so excited. The catchword has been, it's got to be festival worthy. Well, this is festival worthy and some. It's among the best programs we've ever brought you, despite all the restrictions, despite all the challenges. It's an absolute belter. So I don't know about you, but I can't wait to hear live performance again. I know streaming is all very well. You know, it was my life. I was a television person for 28 years. But there is nothing like live performance, is there? And I'm desperate to get back to it, and I know you are as well. So come and join us in July. Bring another friend. We'll find room for you somehow, I'm sure. But bring as many friends as you can, because we need all you friends. We need the more friends, the better, because the more friends we have, the more adventurous we can be in the future. And Buxton International Festival, thanks to all of you, thanks to your enthusiasm, is here not only for this coming July, but for every July in the foreseeable future. You know, we celebrated, the last Buxton Festival we celebrated 40 uninterrupted years. I hope that we're going to have at least another 40 uninterrupted years after this one, if not more than that. But I'll look forward to another 40 years together, and then let somebody else think and worry about the future. Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Emily. But most of all, thank you to all of you, our audience.
Absolute pleasure. All the best. See you in July.